going through some of the use of force changes. Can you break down what those are and why did you come to those ones you wanted to focus on?
Sure. So we're going to have 4 use of force changes, and I'll call them points of emphasis for the Omaha Police Department. The first one is the duty to intervene. I think you saw in the Minneapolis incident with George Floyd, there was plenty of officers around that could have intervened. Now we've always had that as part of our training, but now we're going to put that actually in our policy. So if an officer sees another officer utilizing excessive force, they have to intervene. The second one is the knee to neck pin, which you also saw in Minneapolis. We've never taught that within the Omaha Police Department, but we went ahead and just decided to insert it into our policy, and we're just banning it. It's forbidden. The third one is the prone position. Positional asphyxia is when there's too much weight on a body and somebody can't breathe and they end up suffocating. That happens quite a bit in law enforcement when the subject is on the ground prone with the handcuffs behind their back. So what we're teaching is get them off the prone position as soon as possible, sit them up, stand them up, or get them in the police car. Let's prevent that positional asphyxia. And then the fourth one is the Omaha Police Department has always had chokeholds banned. We don't teach it, but we do use a carotid restraint control hold, and we will elevate the force continuum so the officer can only use it when they're being attacked or during the course of deadly force encounter. So those are the changes that we've made to our policy in relation to everything we've seen across the country and the things that we've heard here locally. I will say, Jennifer, that the Omaha Police Department's been very, very much ahead of the game as it relates to officer-involved shootings, and that because that's your predominant in-custody death situation involving a police officer. In 2010, we had 11. In 2019, we're all the way down to 1. And then in 2020, we haven't had any yet. So we've spent a good amount of time with the professionalism of the police department getting to these numbers, and we just wanted to take it a little further.
When you talked about the duty to intervene, is that something then that you could reprimand someone if they didn't?
Yeah, absolutely. If now that it is in policy, and we will train on it as well, if somebody does not intervene, it could include reprimand all the way up to a termination.
And these trainings, this is going to be happening for every officer.
Right, every officer in response to these changes and in response to everything that we've heard and potentially learned throughout the protest events throughout the entire country. There's going to be an in-service training taking place for the entire Omaha Police Department, which will take place in July. And it's designed to improve officer safety, but also designed to implement what we have learned and what we've heard from our community, and then the things that we've heard across the country that have made sense to us to implement.
With that, we've heard from other places, they've talked about other changes, you hear different terms for it, but defund the police department,
Sure.
things like that.
Sure.
Were there things like that discussed or things that were left on the table that you're not moving toward, or are those not options here?
The decision to defund the police department would be mine. It's my responsibility to do the city budget, and it's my responsibility to manage it. When I do the budget, I work with each department director, including the police chief, on developing their budget, and they get the money that they need to run their department and to run it well. And I do not feel like defunding the police department would be a responsible decision for me. It would be a reckless decision at this point. A lot of the emails I'm getting from all over the country are saying defund the police department and put the money in social programs or community programs, community service programs. We already do that. And if you look at our city budget, we fund a lot of city community-based programs, including workforce development and job training, a multitude of different types of community programs. So we do that already. And so defunding the police department is nothing that I would even consider doing at this point. What we want to do, the chief and I, with these changes that we're announcing today, is to say we do want a more diverse and inclusive community. We want a more diverse and inclusive government, and we want to make a very good police department even better. That is our goals.
One thing I have heard from places that are implementing pretty radical changes is talking about the mental health co-responder,
Yeah.
which I was reading, and that's something that's already in
is.
the police
Yes.
department. Can you explain how that process works?
Sure. So, how we respond to those in mental crisis is very important for law enforcement because we will be that first responder, especially if it's dangerous. We're the first touch that person will have. So, it's imperative that we get it right. And over the course of the last few years, we've implemented new changes to that policy. The first is in the area of crisis intervention training. That's advanced training of how officers know how to interact with those in a mental crisis. And we've probably got almost a third of our entire department who's crisis intervention trained. But the big one is, and you hear it talked about a lot across the country, is our co-responder program. And what that is, we have a mental health professional, a civilian that works for the police department in each one of our precincts. And they will co-respond to those calls with us. So we'll make sure it's safe, but they're there as well to help communicate and provide services to those that we come in contact with. And it has really, really been a positive thing for the city of Omaha and the police department. And it's one of the biggest hallmarks, I think, of progress that a major city can make. And we're happy in Omaha that we're kind of ahead of the game on that.
And it's relatively new.
Yeah,
That's relatively new.
Do you know when it was implemented or what?
Yeah, we started looking at it in 2016, and we finally got it implemented about a year ago. So it's been up and running for a year, and so we're able to look back and see all the success stories. It's something we're very proud of.
And this additional training that Chief Schmaderer and the in-service training that he's talking about, it's important for, I think, our citizens to know is that we already do go above and beyond with our police department on their ongoing training. They're required for 20 hours a year by state law. We do 48 hours a year. So we are already doing ongoing training. But can we reinforce certain areas and do it better? Yes, we can, and that's what we're doing.
You talked a lot about the citizen review board and some changes that will be made
Yes.
with that. Can you discuss what those changes are, Mayor?
Sure. One of the movements around the country with the messages that people are giving about changes in the police department or people are demanding a police auditor. We did that, several years ago in Omaha, many years ago in Omaha. And when I became mayor, I supported much more than one person being a police auditor to have a citizen-led complaint review board. How it runs is that I appoint them and then I have no oversight on them. They're totally independent from me, but there's one person from each precinct, one at large, and then one alternate. And their job is if a citizen has a complaint against an officer, they file it with Internal Affairs and the chief. When the chief reviews it, makes a decision, and issues discipline or whatever the decision is, in the letter he writes the complainant, he says, this is my decision, but if you are not happy with my decision or you disagree with it, you have a chance to appeal it to the citizen-led complaint review board. That review board then can take all the information Internal Affairs has and they can review it. They see the videos, they see everything. It is very confidential though, and that's part of how it was designed. And people say they don't feel like it's transparent enough. They want to know what these issues are and what the decisions of this board have been. So the changes I want to make, and I will make it as amending my own executive order, would be number one, that every year that they would do a report to the community and they would let the community know how many cases they examined, what the issues were, what the results were, taking the names out, of course. And I think that will give a little bit more transparency to that process. The other thing is if somebody files a complaint, there's multiple places that they could get the complaint form, but they file it directly with the chief in Internal Affairs. And sometimes the CCRB doesn't even get a chance to see what those are if they agree with his decision. So I want to change it so that people can file directly with the CCRB. So they could see what those complaints were, those citizens. The chief will still do the investigation with Internal Affairs, but at least it will give them the opportunity to see everything that's coming in. So I think that's a much better process and it's much more transparent. So my goal, again, is to make the police department and the city more transparent, more accountable, and then improve on our ongoing training. And that's what we are trying to do with all of these measures, these action measures that we're taking today.
You know, in Minneapolis with Officer Chauvin, one of the things was he had a lengthy past
Yes.
of reports and incidents in his file. I think that's part of the transparency thing. What is your response to someone who might be watching and saying, well, why can't these names be public? Why can't we know every officer who's being investigated for one reason or another?
And it has a lot to do with a labor contract. You know, every person that goes through a personnel issues are, whether it's the city of Omaha or a big business, are usually confidential and private. And every one of the employees of the city of Omaha, whether you are a police officer or whether you work in public works or planning and you have civil service protection, you do have a right for due process. You do have that right, and we have to uphold the law. And so I think that's what's really important about what we are doing. We're trying to uphold the law, give them the confidentiality with the investigation, but then also make it as transparent as we possibly can.
There are a lot of new boards and positions that will be in place to
Yes.
try to make the city more inclusive. How do you see that working in terms of how often will you be meeting with these folks? Really, how did you come to the decision that you wanted these in place even?
Right. I appoint about 65 boards and commissions. That's part of my job. And I have created new advisory boards since I have been mayor. And what I wanted to do is, whether it was an issue that I saw myself or an issue that was brought to me, if there was a group of people that felt like their voice was not being heard, I wanted to create some sort of advisory so that they could have input directly to me. Examples of some of these are the Native American Advisory, the LGBT, the Millennial Advisory. I have a youth advisory, and all of those that I just mentioned are very active, and they provide very important information to me. So I felt like it was really important to name a community advisory board as far as diversity and inclusion, to let me know what they are seeing out in the public, out in the community, and advise me on issues about how they think I can make the city better. Along with that, we've never had an internal advisory board of city employees, and I thought that would be very helpful to me too. A lot of times in other departments, whether it be parks or libraries or public works, that employee feels like they never really get a chance to come in and talk directly with the mayor. And I felt like that would be a really important advisory group too, of city employees forming an advisory group to give me their opinions and their thoughts on how to be more diverse. And I think that's important too. And then also to create a new diversity and inclusion manager. We had in the past, since I've been mayor, a deputy chief of staff for diversity and inclusion. Then we kind of moved that position to Human Rights and Relations. But I think it's really important that I have that position in this office too, that will advise me. We always want to make our police, fire department, every department more diverse. How to do that, whether it's being out there and recruiting, and where do you go to recruit? I need somebody focused on that issue every day to go out there and give me ideas of how they think we could function better. So that's why I think that new position is important too. So all of these things are measures, again, that we think it's just going to make the city better all around, not just for the city employees, but all around. The last thing I am going to do is make it mandatory that every city employee, not just our fire department, our police department, but every city employee receives non-bias training, and that includes my office and myself. And so that is something that we will start working on right away to make sure every city employee is trained.
So it sounds like a new position in there, more training, things like
Yes.
that. I have to ask, especially given everything we've heard about COVID expenses, budget concerns with any of this?
Yes, always. And what, I'm just finishing up the 2021 budget. This new position would be funded in 2021. We are looking right now, and we are basing our budget that we are almost done developing, that 2021 will be a normal year, that our revenues will be the same. The challenge right now I have is in 2020 because of revenue loss, because of COVID, and trying to manipulate through this budget year to get us balanced out by the end of the year. This position will start in January, and so we are just looking at January as a normal year right now.
Switching gears a little bit, I've read a couple things you've said regarding the Leavenworth Cafe. Care to discuss your thoughts on that? We saw it
Sure.
essentially said they had to close down because of the actions done there. What do you think should have happened, or what did you see happening that maybe shouldn't have?
Sure. And, we met with the Coneglias, the three Tonys. We met with them on Tuesday morning. The chief was with me, as well as Matt Kuzi, our city prosecutor. We asked them to come in because every story has two sides, and we wanted to sit down and listen to them and have them tell us their side of the story of what went on that day. Or those 2 days, I did ask the chief to do an investigation, an internal investigation, to really look at all the videos we have, the restaurant head videos. There were body cameras there, to see if there was any criminal behavior there, if there was anything that we could see that was inciting issues that could be unlawful. There was rumors about extortion, and we just wanted to hear their side of the story and be able to review everything that happened that day. The chief can address what he has seen so far. Not done with the investigation yet, but has reviewed quite a bit of the videos and things so far. What we heard from the Coneglia family, though, I will say, is it was Tony Jr. that put out quite a few. It was either Facebook posts or tweets. He told us too that he knew what he said, and he told us two things that he did say on Twitter, and they were wrong and they were inappropriate. And he knows they were wrong and inappropriate. So he has taken down that Facebook. But as far as the investigation so far, I'll let the chief address it.
Sure. I mean, obviously we needed to look into the extortion piece or any other crimes that may have occurred there. And as this investigation has unfolded, we do not anticipate making any arrest or on either of those fronts. So at this point in time, there's a few other things to do, but it looks like that incident is done. It's over with. And for the most part, that was a legal protest. Probably the dynamic that played out differently there than other protest scenes that you might see is the sidewalk was right in front of the business. So the sidewalk is a public right-of-way where you can protest on. Most times there's a buffer between the sidewalk and the window entry to a business, and it wasn't on this occasion, and that caused a lot of problems.
So we have to let people protest. I mean, that is their right on public right-of-way, and a sidewalk is public right-of-way. But when the building itself butts right against the sidewalk, and somebody's touching the building, well, that's private property. So we really wanted to take a careful look at everything that happened that day. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted them to come in to listen to their side of the story. But I also wanted to deliver the message to them that as mayor, I want to help every business, every restaurant in Omaha recover from COVID. They, along with every other restaurant, were closed for quite a while. They were only doing curbside service for a while. They have just got back into business, and I hate to see any business fail. And so my message to them is if I could do anything I can within my power as mayor to help them reopen in another site, my help is offered to them, and I'm happy to help them. We don't want to see them closed because of an issue like this.
Do they think they'll be able to reopen somehow?
I think that they are, well, maybe I'm hopefully wishing here, but I think that is still not out of the picture. They did tell us that they would not open up at that same site again in the future.
Speaking of investigations, we received an email today from the special prosecutor again saying, please get the word out if there's any information, audio, video regarding the James Spurlock case. Right. Has anyone come forward with any more information? Anything you can speak on that?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot additional information ever since the incident occurred, and really day after day after day we get a lot more information. That occurred during the course of pretty good civil unrest. That was our busiest night, I would say, maybe in many, many years in the city of Omaha, of course.